Today we will journey into the distant past, to those far-off times when formidable Roman legions marched confidently across the land, and the empire stretched across vast territories. We will describe what everyday life was like for the most ordinary bearers of the sword, those who served the emperor without the slightest knowledge of modern analyses, charts, complex statistical reports, or heavy historical tomes. Over the next few minutes, we will focus exclusively on what truly mattered to a common soldier, his pay, daily expenses, and, of course, the entertainments that helped pass the time between marches and battles. Let us imagine our typical hero, let's call him, for example, Quadratus. There is nothing strange or fictional about such a name. In that era, such nicknames really existed and were quite often found on various inscriptions discovered by archaeologists on Roman tombstones and other monuments. To be precise, it was not a full personal name as we understand it today, but a cognomen, a distinctive, memorable nickname. The thing is, the naming system for Roman citizens was quite colorful and usually consisted of three main parts: praenomen, personal name; nomen, clan or family name; and cognomen, individual nickname or branch of the family. To simplify, it roughly corresponds to our first name, last name, and additional nickname. The main difference from modern tradition is that the third part is usually a patronymic in our culture, while for Romans, it was a nickname, and often it became the most unique and personal element of a full name. Take the classic example, the great Gaius Julius Caesar. For the uninitiated, this is a complete puzzle. Gaius is the praenomen, the personal name; Julius is the nomen, the family name; and Caesar is the cognomen, a nickname whose true meaning scholars still debate. Some suggest it may have teased someone with thick hair, others insist it meant divine or something similar. By the way, it has nothing to do with the famous salad. The Caesar salad appeared many centuries later. The point is that a boy usually received his personal name, praenomen, from his father. So, the son of the famous dictator was also called Gaius Julius Caesar. To distinguish father from son, clarifications like senior, / junior, or simply ordinal numbers were often added. The situation with girls was even more curious. At birth, they received the feminine form of their father's family name. For example, the daughter of Gaius Julius Caesar was called Julia, and after marriage, they often added or replaced it with a derivative of their husband's name, so Julia could become Julia Pompeia if she married Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus. If a family had many sons, some of them could acquire a second or even third cognomen. By the late period of the Roman Empire, there were already people with 5 names in their full title, true multi-layered constructions. Even the famous Caligula was actually named Gaius Julius Caesar, and only the nickname, Caligula, Little Boot, helped historians distinguish him from his famous ancestor murdered by Brutus. Textbooks therefore usually use this nickname, although formally it was an additional name. But our hero is a simple soldier, an ordinary working man in armor, so his name remains modest and common. Let him be Lucius Quadratus, and among his close ones, simply Quadratus. His relatives might call him Lucius, but to most acquaintances and fellow soldiers, he was Quadratus or by his nomen, Sanctionius, if using the full form. One of Quadratus' distant ancestors was a legendary warrior who fought against Hannibal during the Punic Wars. Even 300 years later, descendants proudly bore this name, while the unique part remained the nickname Quadratus, the origin of which, as usual, was lost over the centuries. Perhaps the ancestor was unusually broad-shouldered and square in build, or maybe he just loved to eat heartily, who can tell now? The year is approximately 15 CE. The Roman Empire is at the peak of its power, its borders stretch from the northern lands of modern France to the depths of Africa, and this vast territory is ruled by a mighty army, the legions, one of whose soldiers is our Quadratus. The word Lucius was used only by the closest, mother, father, maybe sister. For everyone else, he was Quadratus or by surname. His father, like the vast majority of legionaries, was an ordinary poor farmer, barely making ends meet. So, when Quadratus turned 18, he joined the army. By the standards of the time, the conditions seemed almost luxurious, especially compared to hard peasant labor. Not long ago, Emperor Octavian Augustus, the very Gaius Julius Caesar Octavian, generously increased the pay of legionaries. It now amounted to 900 sesterces per year, roughly 225 denarii, or about 9 gold aurei. Plus, a solid bonus of 3 aurei was given upon signing the contract. Excavations in Pompeii show that an ordinary person could live a day on 2 sesterces. 1 sesterce could buy 4 plates of simple soup or stew. In very rough modern terms, 1 sesterce was roughly equivalent to 1.5 to 2 euros, in terms of purchasing power for basic products. A liter of ordinary wine cost about the same, 2 sesterces, meaning Quadratus could afford a jug of wine for the equivalent of a couple of modern euros. But a good mule, necessary for a farm, cost 1,000 sesterces, a serious purchase even for a soldier. The term of service, however, was intimidating, 20 to 25 years, depending on the period and place of service. Before Augustus' reforms, it was sometimes 6 years, but in Quadratus' time, near the end of the 1st century, it was often necessary to serve all 26 years. On the other hand, life as a poor civilian laborer was no easier, 14 to 16 hours of hard physical work daily. Therefore, service in the legion seemed not a bad fate for many. At the end, they were granted 12,000 sesterces, sometimes even more, plus a land plot, sometimes quite decent, sometimes, alas, abandoned or infertile. Stories of veterans being cheated, not receiving promised pay, or being given useless land are numerous. But our Quadratus is a conscientious, reliable soldier, so fate will likely spare him such troubles. And there are still 4 months of harsh recruit training ahead before discharge. In the famous treatise of Vegetius on military matters, there is a simple but very accurate thought: Romans conquered almost the entire known world only thanks to iron discipline, strict camp regulations, and constant practice. And he is absolutely right. After grueling training, Quadratus learned to cover 35 kilometers in 5 hours at a brisk pace, carrying over 20 kilograms of equipment. Along the way, he mastered a complex signaling system: horns, banners, gestures. Roman commanders considered maintaining a tight formation the key to victory, and the results of their wars brilliantly confirmed this. During training, everything was practiced: formations, tortoise, wedge, boar, sword fighting with wooden swords, archery. Quadratus would emerge a true fighting machine, a versatile machine capable of almost anything. Not every modern army can boast such comprehensive care for its soldiers. Legionaries were even taught to swim in full armor to avoid drowning when crossing rivers. Unlike medieval armies, where dysentery and poor sanitation claimed thousands of lives, Roman legions paid primary attention to health. Every product that reached the soldiers was carefully inspected, water studied by officers to avoid poisoning. If there was a wound or illness, special medical detachments existed, hospitals in every major camp. Even an inscription survives ordering a legate, when storming a city, set up camp several kilometers from the walls, so the wounded would not hear the battle and could recover peacefully. Morale was also important. No communal barracks canteens, no feeling of being a mere cog. Legionaries were divided into centuries, and inside, into contubernia, small groups of 8 men, who lived, ate, slept, and fought together. Romans deliberately created such families. These 8s did everything together, from cooking to evening gatherings. As a result, soldiers fought primarily not for a distant emperor, but for their brothers in arms, those with whom they shared bread, danger, and a tent. This was not only allowed, but actively encouraged from above. For an ordinary legionary, priorities were set as follows: first, the life of his contubernium comrades, then the honor of his century, 80 to 100 men, and only then the glory of the entire legion, 60 centuries. This revolutionary system, when side by side stood not random men, but brothers in arms who had lived together for years, allowed Rome to achieve incredible success. On many tombstones of the time, the word brother appears, a vivid testament to the depth of these bonds. Yet there were similarities with modern times. Legions did not always fight. Our Quadratus could spend a year as a policeman, road builder, tax collector, or guard. Once a year, Natalie's Aquili, the birthday of the eagle, Legion Standard, was celebrated, a feast, demonstration exercises, festivities, all to maintain morale. Even during long campaigns, boredom was rare, gambling thrived everywhere. They played dice, heads or ship, called head or ship, complex tic-tac-toe called the mill wheel, 3 pieces in a row, and the boldest played tabula, a prototype of modern backgammon, betting entire fortunes. Eventually, authorities even banned gambling by law, but clever soldiers always circumvented the rules. Hopefully, our Quadratus was not addicted to gambling. On average, across the empire, about 60% of legionaries reached retirement, though this number is greatly reduced in frontline legions, where half the men could be lost in a single day. Do not believe the old myth that people in antiquity lived on average 30 years, and a 60-year-old was considered a miracle. This is a gross distortion caused by high child mortality. With the advent of antibiotics and hygiene, average life expectancy rose sharply, primarily due to lower child mortality. If a person in ancient Rome reached adulthood, their chances of reaching old age were not much worse than today. So, if Quadratus serves his 20 to 26 years successfully, by his early 40s he could have a beautiful wife, children, and live peacefully on a farm, either granted by the state or purchased with savings and discharge pay. The life of a Roman legionary cannot be called easy or carefree. But it is safe to say, in those times, a soldier was not considered expendable. Discipline, combat skills, physical fitness, and food quality were constantly worked on. Medics were always nearby, ready to help even under a hail of arrows. Of course, anything could happen, desertions of entire centuries, same-sex relationships, not considered unusual, mental breakdowns. But these were exceptions. At the height of its power, the Roman army was an incredibly organized machine, in logistics, medicine, and management comparable to modern states. And our Quadratus sincerely believed he lived honorably, served a great cause, and had well-deserved rest, land, and decent bonuses from the empire ahead. If you want to learn even more about life in ancient Rome, don't hesitate to like and write in the comments what you would like to hear about next time. See you soon, friends.